All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Mr. Kimball here again. This is video 2. If you have not watched video 1, then stop, go back and watch video 1. This video, I'm going to help you out tremendously with these think questions, and then I'll probably go ahead and slide into the skills assignments that you have too. Okay, and forgive me, it's still early morning, so I am drinking my coffee still. Trying to get my morning gasoline. Had this cup made for me. It says Up and Atom, given to me by my sister-in-law whenever I officiated their wedding. So nice little cup, keeping my coffee warm. Okay, so here's the deal. If you have not read the Declaration of Independence, if you have not watched the Study Sync video, then you need to stop. You need to do that work first. I'm a firm believer that if you are not prepared to do this kind of work because you didn't prepare yourself on the front end, then you should not, just reap the benefits of what I'm about to do for you. Um, because here's what I want you to think about. I am in that process where I'm videotaping for the national board, submission that I'm working on, right? So anytime that we meet in class, there's a good chance we're going to have conversation, and I'm going to be guiding you through some questions, asking you some questions, letting you guys talk. And if you don't have the work done, then you don't have anything to have true conversation about. You have to know the material, you have to understand the context before you can have the good conversations in there. So if you haven't done that previous work, stop this video, do that work, and then come back to this. This is also going to be one of those videos that you'll be watching, and then you'll probably want to hit pause so that you can type, and pause so you can type, and pause so you can type. That's perfectly fine. And I will have moments between some of these questions where I'll just kind of pause and give you that opportunity to hit the button without losing material. So there are 8 think questions here. Let's get right into it. Let me just read through the questions real quickly, and then I'm going to slide into a different screen and help you by really just kind of giving you the answers that are in the teacher's booklet. Okay, just to kind of move things forward. So the first question, according to the first paragraph, what is the purpose of the Declaration of Independence beyond simply claiming freedom from British rule? Like, we understand that. We're offering our reasons why we're separating from Britain. So what is the actual purpose of the Declaration of Independence? That's that first paragraph, that first full paragraph that's there. And identify the phrase that states this purpose most clearly and relate it to the rest of the document. Okay, it's going to be those founding principles, those idea indicators that we establish later our Constitution based on what's in the Declaration of Independence. So that's what it's asking you to find and identify. Question 2, and I'll go through the answers in a bit. I just want to go through the questions first. In paragraph 2, what does Jefferson say about the treatment of colonists under King of Great Britain? And according to Jefferson, what justifies a revolt against the existing government? Use evidence from the text to support your response. So, we're going to talk about, the cruel treatment, if we have our founding principles of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, is the king living up to those? And if not, is that the reason why we're separating? We're going to have that conversation come up. Where in the document does Jefferson officially declare independence, and how does he define independence from or for the states? Use evidence from the text to support your response. Now, this is where, if we were to really deep dive into the woods here and dig into what's here, this is where the Constitution is a little bit different than the Declaration of Independence. The foundation is there, but it's not completely there. Okay, the idea of separation of states, each state being able to do the list of things that's listed in the Declaration of Independence. We don't necessarily have that much power as far as statehood, but again, we'll get into that in just a moment. Question 4. Consider the Latin root of consanguinity, which is sanguis, which means blood, and con means with. So with blood, you put those two things together, with blood. Find a reasonable definition of the word in the context of this document. Can you find any supporting evidence that your definition for your definition in the same paragraph. So it's considering a specific paragraph, so be careful with that. Question 5, consider the meaning of the Latin root rect, right or straight. Use what you know, find a definition for rectitude, and then find other words that have that same R-E-C-T as a root. Question 6, 6, 7, and 8 kind of deal with segments of the video. So I'm not going to play those right now, but you would watch those segments of the video and then answer the question. So this one is before they answer the prompt, how do the students prepare themselves for the discussion? Question 7, another video, how do the students analyze the complaint about trade? How do they further their understanding of the topic? And finally, question number 8, the last video, how do the students build on each other's thoughts as they analyze the third complaint? What conclusion do they make? Okay, so let's answer each one of those. So I've opened up my teacher's document, the lesson plan document that goes with this, and there are specific answers. Let me scroll down. Sorry, that's really fast. But let me get down into the answer key section. So here are the think questions. Let me make this quite a bit bigger. Do that one more and still stay on the page here. So the think questions, let me get underneath my video here. So the first one, the purpose of the declaration is to list a number of grievances and reasons for declaring independence from Britain. That's your answer, okay? The phrase that most clearly shows this purpose is declare the cause which impelled them to separation. So as you answer that question, again, after you hear this, then you'll want to hit pause, go and answer that in a very similar way. You'll probably want to go ahead and identify exactly where that is in the text, okay? So the purpose of the declaration is to list a large number of grievances. That's that whole list. The king did this, blah, 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 blah. That's 2/3 of the entire document is a list of grievances. And then declare independence from Britain. Okay, and then the phrase that clearly says that is declare the cause which impelled them to separation. Question 2. The colonists' experience with the king are described as a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, which means he's continuing to screw us over with policies, with procedures. The whole list identifies very specific things, and it's not like they've just happened once. They've been happening for years and over and over and over, and to multiple people. The general population of those that are in the colonies are experiencing all of the things that are in that list. Okay, so a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, and then it goes on to answer the rest of the questions. Jefferson thinks the king himself is a tyrant, and he defines tyrant. Jefferson thinks the revolt is justified because when a government does not protect individual rights, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. And again, that firm reliance on life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, inalienable rights, all of that is the foundation. And that's what they're declaring is that's our starting point. Our starting point is life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And if the king is not upholding those kinds of rights, then it's up to the people to abolish it, to change it, or just completely get rid of it. Okay, so that's question number 2. You want to answer that way. Question number 3. The last paragraph is whenever it's officially declared that states are independent. So it's in that very last paragraph. That's the answer to question number 3. He defines independent states as ones that have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, and establish commerce. That's where there's a little bit of difference between what the Constitution and what we currently operate on. We don't necessarily, as individual states, have the full power to levy war. So, not to get into the weeds with all of that. That's deeper stuff. But the answer to your question, number 3, last paragraph, declares us officially independent, and individual states have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, and establish commerce. And by the way, anything that's in that color, is direct quote from the original source. Okay, so that's question 3. Question 4. Jefferson refers to brethren, common kindred, and connections earlier in that paragraph. So consanguinity means a person who shares blood with another, such as a relative or family member. In other classes, my 4th, 5th, and 6th hour, we also talked about this idea of brethren, common kindred, and connections, not just literal blood related, but because of their experiences, the long list of items that the king is putting them through, they're all going through it. So it's not just literal blood family line connection. It's that connection of experiences that the king is imposing on all of them. So consanguinity has that additional connotation of shared experiences. Okay, so that's question 4. Question 5. Jefferson began the Declaration of Independence by describing self-evident truths and equality, for all men. So I think rectitude means the state of being right or correct. That is absolutely correct. What this part of the question leaves out is additional words with the RECT in it. So we have words like rectify, correct is in there, and there are others. So I'm going to look for additional words that you find without me spoon feeding them to you right now. I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of additional work and find that Latin root, RECT, and give me maybe 3 or 4 more words that have that in there. Okay, so that's question 5. Question 6, they mention each of the students' names in the answer here. Um, So basically, Isaiah says they need to break down the prompt. So to answer the question, they look specifically at the prompt. Then Daniela says they need to find 3 complaints, one relating to each branch of government. So as they're breaking down the prompt that's there, they are identifying that there's 3 separate categories and they need to isolate their conversation. One category, one proof, another category, another proof, third category, third proof. Okay. The students name the 3 branches of government. They have a conversation about each of the branches of government. Daniela says the Declaration helped form the government by stating how the British monarchy was abusing its power. Isaiah adds that the 3 branches were created to make sure the abuses did not happen again. So that whole idea of checks and balances, it's so that we don't have one group, one individual that lays out the policy for everyone and could become oppressive like a monarchy that these founding fathers were experiencing. So it's all about separation of powers so that those abuses could not happen again. Okay, so that's question 6. Okay, question 7, that second video that's there. Again, they are naming the people. So Theo asked which branch controls trade, and Kristen asked if the president can stop trade. Okay, so they're talking about who can do what. Isaiah says that he did additional research and he shares what he found. So to answer the question, like what is the process? What did they do? So there's definition, there's additional research. Daniela thinks that the complaint about trade should be both the legislative and executive branches, but they kind of make that argument to focus on one because the president is the one who makes the first move. So they're going to allocate that one to the executive branch because of the starting point. And then Daniela and Kristen ask Isaiah to share what else he found. And to understand it better, Theo repeats the quote that Isaiah reads in his own words. Daniela says that it is another example of checks and balances. So there's a very specific process that they go through. When I talked about this in my other classes, we talked about there was a clear definition, there was additional research, There was application, okay, to make sure. So if you watch that video again, they are actually trying to apply it to their own understanding. It's kind of that connection idea, which is the fourth thing that we talked about. So there's four things there that we used in our answer. The application and connection, that's just so that they can understand the context of what they're talking about a little bit better. And that's how we understand life better too, is if we associate things with what we already know. Okay, so that's question number 7. Okay, question number 8. Isaiah shares the history of the complaint from his notes. So again, he took notes of the Declaration of Independence, and then he kind of listed some things out. Daniela says it could apply to all branches of government. Again, application, that word apply is there. So some of the same things that were listed in question 7's answer are also repeated here. Daniela says it could apply to all the branches of government because none of them would be powerful enough to let that happen. And then to check her reasoning, so there's a little bit of verification, validation. Isaiah and Kristen imagine. So this idea of imagining, that's another form of connection, right? If we imagine, if we picture it in our own mind, apply it to what we already know. So imagine that the president was like the king and that the president brainwashed the legislative branch. Um, Theo says that the law still would go to the Supreme Court where they would undoubtedly find it unconstitutional. So they're kind of playing out, they're applying, they're seeing how it actually would play out with the idea of checks and balances. So they would find that one branch could not control another because the third branch would find it unconstitutional. Okay, so I have an additional question for you. So if you have answered all 8 questions, then my additional question, and I did not include this in a writing assignment format, but it is something that we will talk about in our fishbowl kind of conversation that we'll have in our future. I want you to think about this. We have our separation of powers. We have the executive, the legislative, judicial branches. If you're watching politics at all right now, do we still have a political system where each branch stays in its own lane? So the executive, the president and his cabinet and anybody he kind of uses as advisors, do they stay in their lane and only do the executive side of things? Same question for the legislative branch. Do they just stay in their lane and stay within their parameters of what they're designed to do? And then the third, judicial branch, are they staying in their lane? So let me say it a little bit differently. Let me clarify. I'm not talking about the fact that we have primarily 2 political parties that have led our institutions, and there's the back and forth. So yeah, there's a little bit of mixing there because the party lines. But what I'm really trying to get to is, does the president only do executive things, or does the president step into the role of the legislative branch and try to offer policy and procedures, executive orders? Do the legislators stay in their lane and just come up with laws and policies and procedures, or do they try to get into the judicial side and offer judgments of opinions of their laws? Remember, the judicial side is primarily there to interpret law, right? So that's where the whole checks and balances. That's what I'm asking you. Does the executive stay in his or her lane? Do the legislators stay in their lane? The Congress, the Senate, do they stay, House of Representatives and Senate, do they stay in their lane? Do the judges stay in their lane? And we'll talk about, is there evidence of overlap of their roles? That's an interesting conversation whenever you dive into it. Okay, so let me move on. I've got about 10 minutes or so, and then I need to stop this video because I have to prepare for my next class. So let's see if I can get into the skill set answers here. Let me move my face here and get into the next one. So the next one is the rhetoric skill. And as you look at the rhetoric skill, it'll ask you to talk about ethos, logos, and pathos. So pay very specific attention to that. Rules of engagement, rules of persuasion is a part of rhetoric. That's what rhetoric is. It's the art of persuasion. So you'll get into that. Make sure that you're reading the model that's in there and paying attention to all the things. But I want to try to get right into the answer to the questions. Okay. So thank you for sticking with me this long. There's definitely reward for sticking with me. Okay. Let me see if I can find the actual answers. So we have our model there. We have our discussion topics, and then we have the your turn. And that's what I want. Answer key. Model your turn. Here we go. So your answers to part A is the one where Jefferson uses repetition to emphasize his key points. And again, I'm going to leave this on the screen. If you want to pause it and kind of read through the answers so you know why the other ones are not the right answers, you can do that. And then part B is also B. Jefferson's repetitions of the word such emphasizes cause and effect relationship between conditions of the colonists that they have felt compelled to suffer and change in government that they feel compelled to make. And then you see the reasons why the other ones are incorrect. So for the rhetoric skill assignment, the answers are B and B. And let me go into, sorry, that's really fast. Let me go into the other skills assignment. Some of the same rhetoric conversation comes up with this arguments and claims, because if you're going to argue with someone, if you're going to make a claim and back it up with evidence, you're dealing with a persuasive kind of technique. So rhetoric is included in this argument lesson here. Let me go similarly all the way down to the bottom. The your turn answers here. Okay, so part A is going to be C. Part B is going to be A. And please read through the answers so that you understand why the other ones are not correct. Okay. All right, so let me get out of that. Hopefully that was enough time for you to pause and read through them as you needed to. Okay, and then finally the close read. I am not going to open that one up and give you the answers to those quiz questions, because remember, the quiz questions I treat as accuracy grades. So I am asking you to spend your time and effort in there. Okay, so before I leave this video, the last thing that I want to encourage you to do is this blast. This blast gets us to think about, we have a Declaration of Independence, right? There are other countries who have been formed since World War I, World War II, who have tried to establish democracies. They've tried to use our documents, Declaration of Independence and Constitution, to frame their own governments. So this one, this blast, really gets you to think about that idea and gives you some very specific examples in the research links. This blast, let me preview it for a second. The research links that are in the blast are going to be one piece of the general conversation. So I'm not asking you to be masters of any of the research articles. And of course, it's not going to show them right now. Okay, but you understand. On the bottom of your blast, there's a research section. There's 6 articles. Open them up. 2 of them, you have to have a subscription to read the whole thing, but they both have summaries there. So just look at the summary. Don't worry about all the subscription. Of course, ignore all the ads and all that kind of stuff. That is one of the frustrating pieces about a lot of these research articles, is they're on these public documents, and there's all kinds of ads all over them. So I apologize for that. But the other 4, just briefly cover what's there. Just get a general understanding of the content that is there. The general question is, what does it take to build a country after declaring independence? So all of the examples that you see are countries that say, hey, we've been controlled by someone else. Now we want to be independent. Here's what we did. Okay. So we have our example, the United States of America. We have our Declaration of Independence. That's what we did. We signed a document. We list all of our complaints. We declare ourselves independent, and we'll say we'll go to war if we need to. And we know that we did go to war. And then after the war, we started these constitutional conventions and we created our own form of government. Well, other countries have done similar things, and that's what this blast is going to introduce you to. Okay, I need to get out of this so I can get ready for my next class. Hopefully, all of that has been a good help to you. You are expected by Monday at 3 o'clock to have all of those assignments completed. Okay, so do your best. You could use this video, answer those questions, get the close read done on your own time, and get the blast done on your own time. All right, guys. There might be one more video. I'll see how the next hour goes or so with my next class. But if not, then at least you have a very good start of what I'm expecting you to do. All right, guys. Talk to you later.